Hello, my name is Miles, and I am your host of Stop Stigma, Start Healing, the raw and uncensored podcast where we talk openly and unapologetically about our lives as trans, lesbian, bi, gay, queer, and HIV positive humans. Our goal is to stop the stigma that prevents us from getting the healthcare we deserve. Each episode, we will feature real people in our community, right here, in conversation and storytelling. And our disclaimer, the experiences shared here are valuable and important. They are based on the lives of those in this space and some of you who are listening. Prepare to be educated, shocked, seen, triggered, and informed. No matter your response, keep the conversation going. Start healing. So welcome to our next episode, which we are calling Happy Hour. We'll get into a little bit more about why that is. But I would like to have our guests introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about who they are. We're doing everything different today. So We're going to end with you. We're going to start over here on the couch.
Hi, I'm Jen. My pronouns are she, her. I'm an avid softball player, a cat lover, and I am a lesbian. I'm also an alcoholic, and it's really nice to be here today.
Great. Cat lover and a lesbian.
Yes.
Love it.
I'm Brian Goldthorpe. I am 44. I like long walks on the beach. We're not doing that. No, I'm a poly drug addict. I work in the communications and public relations space. Love dogs, not so much cats. And I'm happy to be here today.
Thanks, Brian.
I am Anthony, 47-year-old gay man, alcoholic, but probably more of a drug addict. Love dogs and cats, and I actually work in treatment, so that's why I'm dragging today. I'm a lead therapist at a treatment center up north, and thanks for having me.
I just learned something new about you. I had no idea most of those things. Mm-hmm. So I'm glad you are all here today. So this episode specifically is, we're calling it Happy Hour. I wanted to talk about substance use in our community. When I pulled up some facts and figures from the data, and there was a survey done in 2020, not the most recent, but the most recent I could find, from the National Survey on Drug Use and Health. There are 2.6 million LGBTQ adults with substance use disorder. 86.4% of those receive no treatment. Not so great, right? Mm-hmm. Out of that 2.6 million, 1.6 have a relationship with alcohol. 412,000 have a reported relationship with meth, and 263,000 have a relationship with opioids. These numbers here, gosh, I'm going to read them anyway. 1 in 2 struggle with drugs. 1 in 2 of us struggle with drugs, and 3 in 5 struggle with alcohol. So what I came away from with that, and we don't get heavily into the statistics on this show, but what I took away from that is, and I think what we all know, is that substance use is very prevalent in our community. Mm-hmm. I think a very much an acceptable part of our community. Substance use disorders, what we're learning, are severely undertreated in our community. And I think it's important that we talk about it, talk about what that's all about, and also about your journeys in recovery. That's okay. So if we want to go back around the room and in whichever order, tell us your story of your recovery journey.
I'll start.
Okay.
I'm Jen. Like I said, I'm an alcoholic. I have probably been an alcoholic all my life. Every time I drank, I always drank too much. But I didn't drink every day, so I thought I wasn't an alcoholic. And then my sponsor pointed out, you didn't drink every day until you did. And she was exactly right. I was drinking at inappropriate times, at inappropriate places. What I mean is, like, at home by myself, places where I would not be accountable, hiding it from friends, hiding it from family members. I came into AA in January of 2021, And unfortunately, frequent relapses are part of my journey. I just had one that resulted in me being hospitalized for alcohol use, and I was held for 3 days and never realized that was my worst nightmare, and my worst nightmare came true. And I think that was my rock bottom. I thought I'd hit it before. I think I really hit it this time. And my friends became aware of how severe this was. My family also became aware. My takeaway from all that is I become a lot closer to my friends. I become a lot closer to my family, particularly my dad, who wound up having to come to my apartment that night and guide the emergency personnel to help me. And he felt pretty helpless. And I scared my sister. And I feel terrible about that. So I've increased my communication with them. And now I'm celebrating. I have to check the app on my phone because we all have an app for everything, so we don't have to remember anything. I have 42 or 43 days now sober.
Good job.
And thank you. And I'm hoping that was the bottom and that this is a steady road to recovery for me.
Great.
Thanks.
Thanks for sharing that.
So my experience really with drugs and alcohol didn't start until I was just about ready to graduate from college. I was a student and an athlete at a relatively high level during high school and college, but I had started to kind of inch my way out of the closet just before I graduated college, and I experienced some trauma as a result of some of the people who I was around when I came out. And I was really introduced to alcohol as a coping mechanism first. And then I got introduced to opiates a couple of years later. I also experimented with all the party drugs, right? The whole alphabet soup of stuff that we put in our systems. And that worked for me for a while, but it was really in my 20s to early 30s, it was really opiates that drove me. Once I was physically dependent on those medications, I did anything and everything I had to do in order to get them. I went to treatment for the first time when I was about 32 years old, and that was just to detox from the opiates. I came out, relapsed almost immediately, and then I went down the medication management pathway, which was another like 4 years of being on and off quote unquote harm reduction medications, but as they were being doled out at that time in much higher quantities and for much longer times than people should be on those medications, in my opinion. I started to use meth as a way, believe it or not, as a way to get off of the opiates and to ease the withdrawal symptoms from the Suboxone that I was on. I don't advise it, but for me, I really just switched one drug for another. Yeah. And I was one of those really judgmental guys about meth. It was like, oh, I can do all the cocaine in the world, but if I pick up meth, then that's means that I'm some kind of like lower organism. But I went from snorting it by accident, and I thought it was something else, to smoking it, to ingesting it in other ways, and then eventually to injecting it daily for several years before my life finally kind of crumbled down around me. And I got really suicidal. I ended up having to go on a psych hold for a few days. I was in a couple of psych hospitals. I've got a dual diagnosis situation with depression, anxiety, that history of trauma, and everything that I did that I thought I was doing to cope with my problems was just exacerbating them, right? Mm-hmm. And so it took me a really long time to find sobriety, but I found it easier to stay sober than to get sober. And I've really immersed myself in my own recovery over the last year and a half. And yeah, that's it.
Gosh, thanks, Brian. Yeah. You ready?
Yes, I am. My drug use started when I was about 18. It was just like drinking 40 ounces and smoking weed. Then my hardcore use started probably around 1999 with the opening of a gay club in the Short North where partying was very prevalent. So it started out ecstasy, Special K, graduated to meth. And then the thing, much like Brian, I was always kind of turn my nose up at crackheads. And I always said as long as I'm snorting coke, I'm not bad because, unless I hit the pipe. Crack was the drug that brought me to my knees back in 2008. Still living at home, age 32, just a bum, couldn't keep a job. First attempt at sobriety was 2011. It didn't stick because I didn't take it seriously. So my family shipped me off to Skid Row, a treatment center in downtown LA, back in 2012, in October. Through God's grace, that's my sobriety day, October 10th of 2012. But yeah, it took me going out of state to a treatment center on Skid Row for me to actually get it. Yeah, and that's pretty much it.
Thanks for that. So if we could talk a little bit, and this doesn't have to be so, one than the next, but just curious about your own coming out experiences, what those were like. You started with a little bit of it, but what was your coming out experience like?
Ladies first.
Okay. I'm a bit of an anomaly. I didn't come out till I was 35.
Oh, I remember this story.
And it wasn't until I was at happy hours with some colleagues at a new job that I realized there was one woman there who I really enjoyed spending time with. And went to bars and went to dance clubs and stuff with her and realized that, hey, I like her. I really like her. I like her a lot. But I'd already been married twice to men, and that didn't work out. Now I realize for obvious reasons. But I entered into a relationship with her. She was 18 years older than me, so there was that going against us. But I will say she was a great first girlfriend. She introduced me to the gay scene of Columbus, and not so much, she was the designated driver most of the time because I liked to dance and drink, and I was the partier, but I was also the younger one. So she kind of took care of me. And that relationship ended, that lasted, like I said, for about 18 months. Dated somebody for a couple of days, and then a few months later, I met my second spouse, which is a trans man, female to male trans. We got divorced last summer. It was not a good situation. The divorce, we're told not to make major decisions or choices within the first year of sobriety, but this was going on way before I got sober. So this needed to happen in order to save my mental health. And like Brian, I have dual diagnosis too of depression, ADHD, and anxiety that I'm treated for by a wonderful psychiatrist and great therapist. But when I came out at 35, I told my parents, and all they said was, "Are you trying to tell us something?" And I said, "Well, not very well, apparently." and they said, "Well, this is when I was dating my first girlfriend. We'd been together about a month." And I said, "Yeah, I said, I'm gay. I said, I have a girlfriend." And I was kind of trying to back out of the situation at this point, because then it was suddenly getting a little uncomfortable. And I said, "And I have a date in about half an hour." And they're like, "Well, okay, I guess we'll talk more about this later." And I went to my car, called her, said, "I just came out to my parents. I told them I had a date. We're going to the Olive Garden and you're buying." And she's like, "Okay, come pick me up." I'm like, "That's fine." So they have never had any trouble with any decisions that I've made. They don't like people that don't treat me well, whether it's a friend or whether it's a romantic interest. Mm-hmm. So as long as the person treats me well, they have had my people I've been in relationships with over for holidays, for dinner, met out for meals, and gone to events together. So my coming out was very, very easy. My sister was very accepting. I feel awful for those people who were, disowned by their families and had really negative experiences with friends and family and this community as a whole. So any part of my story that I can share that might make something a little easier for somebody else, I'm more than happy to do.
Thanks.
Similar to her, my coming out experience was super easy, especially because the Black community is known for being more homophobic, typically because of them being like very religious. I came out in '92, so when I was 16, it was pretty seamless. Even though I was raised in the church, my mom took about a year to come around. She was part of PFLAG.
Oh, wow.
She was the secretary of the Columbus chapter from like 97 to like 99.
For those that are listening in Wisconsin, what is PFLAG?
Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays. She used to go to gay bars with me, met all my boyfriends, and there were a lot of them. Between the ages of 16 and like my early 20s. My coming out experience was so easy, it was almost kind of like unbelievable, like much like Jen. My entire, a lesbian on my dad's side, his sister, gay cousins, my nephew just came out. Like, I'm blessed in a sense, like it is like a non-issue. And again, I'm not trying to make it a race thing, but that's kind of unheard of in the Black community. So I don't really have a horrible coming out story. My family's still great.
16.
Yep, 31 years ago.
Okay, welcome.
Thank you.
So as I had mentioned, I came out when I was about 22 years old. I started inching my way out of the closet the summer before my senior year of college.
And you said you were doing sports in college?
Yeah, I swam competitively from the time I was like 5 until I graduated college.
Wow.
Yeah, and I was subjected to that locker room culture back then, which is the word faggot was thrown around really freely and loosely. And it kind of, I knew that I was gay from 12 or 13 probably. Yeah. But I just kind of receded because competing in sports was important to me, and that's where all my friends were kind of situated. And so it was tougher. I started to kind of come to grips with the fact that I was going to have to deal with this at some point. And just before I graduated college, I dealt with some physical and sexual trauma that I kept a secret. I didn't really talk to people about it, but it definitely kind of fed my drug use and my alcoholism. It gave me a great excuse, honestly, to use for a really long time, because I was that guy who just didn't feel like, oh, if you'd walked a mile in my shoes, then you would use too. It gave me a great reason to consider myself the exception to the rule. Right. And but in terms of when I actually came out to my parents the summer after I graduated college, and they were cool. My parents have been great. Like I have a small family, but my sister and my parents have been pretty much supportive of everything that I've tried to do in life. People who think that addicts and alcoholics all come from dysfunctional family situations, it's a myth. It's not true. I experienced a lot of distance from my family when I was in active addiction. I pushed them away. I kept them at arm's length. I only gave them bits of information. I was really good at pulling it off for a long time. But my identity as a gay man was not something outside of the first, week or two after I told them, which took a little adjustment time. They've just been super supportive of me and all the dysfunctional relationships that I've had. As we all kind of indoctrinate ourselves to what it's like to be a part of this community, and you take your licks and you kind of, no pun intended, and you kind of you evolve and become a different person. So being gay, it wasn't a problem. The big barrier in my relationship with my parents was the fact that I'm an addict and alcoholic, and that's what really was problematic.
Yeah, it's nice to hear. I mean, really, you all are from supportive families, and I think that it's important to note that I think it's really the substances that drive the wedge in the family relationships.
The lying.
Sure.
Yeah,
Definitely.
right.
Yeah, the dishonesty, the manipulation, like all the things that you have to do when you live in service of a substance.
Yeah, you create that space so you can use as much as you possibly can.
Yeah, ironically, right after I came out, about a year after I came out, I was 17. My mom was like, You being gay is not an issue. Like that's easy. Lord forbid if you ever became a drug addict. Like, I just couldn't stomach it. And fast forward, 7-8 years later, she's like, oh my God, like she made the gay thing look like a walk in the park.
And I thought the drug addict thing was like the worst case scenario, and then I got arrested, right, as a direct result of my drug use. And I was like, oh no, being a criminal is the worst possible thing that you can get labeled with. So yeah, that's the things
Always
you learn.
stepping it up, Brian.
Yeah, you know
Always
what?
Stepping
It right up on the way down.
Well, Jen, you mentioned that some of your early involvement in our community was in bar culture and drinking. And you, I think also, I guess I'm just curious to hear a little bit more about your early days in our community, and
addiction.
and how the things that we do that support using. We won't even call it addiction, but just support using.
Well, I worked for 20 years as a paramedic in emergency rooms.
Yeah.
And drinking is a big part of that culture because it's very stressful. And I don't know about drug use because alcohol has always been my drug of choice. So other substances I'm not familiar with and I won't speak to them. But I remember as soon as we got off work, I was the first one to the bar. I was the first one to buy a round of drinks. I bought the pitchers of beer. I ordered the pizza. That was my deal, but I was so anxious around other people. I wasn't at work. I could keep it together at work, but socially, I was an anxious disaster. So I would always go and I'll get the table. I'll make sure that, there's enough space for everybody. I'll get the first round of drinks ordered. That was just my way of coping with my anxiety. And when I came out, that anxiety didn't go away. So I was still used to self-medicating with that, with the alcohol. And I remember I was at a bar with some coworkers and I was pretty new at this job, so I didn't know people very well. So of course I was anxious and I had pulled I get off before everybody else because we could set our own hours and I'll go and get the table and make sure the server knows there's going to be a group. And I started ordering, I was drinking cherry vodka and Diet Coke and I was ordering doubles and didn't think about it. And the server kept coming back, do you want another, do you want another, do you want another? And I forgot that I was drinking doubles until I got my $80 bar bill. It scared the crap out of me. I mean, it scared the crap out of my bank account. It didn't really scare the crap out of me. But this just progressed after I came out. It was just like, it was kind of like going through the grocery store and you think, oh, the cookies are on this side of the aisle, but there are cookies on this side of the aisle too. Like I can drink here, but look at all these other fun places I can drink. And that's exactly what I did. And that's how my coming out, like I came from a supportive family. Nobody in my family is an addict or an alcoholic. I'm the family record holder for divorces, substance abuse, and being gay. So I put myself on a little pedestal there. A funny little pedestal that falls apart all the time. But this was just an indoctrination into new culture, and I felt I could dance better. I was more social. I was more comfortable with these people because I didn't come out as a teenager. I didn't come out as a young adult, so I didn't grow up this way. So I was, what they might call a baby dyke, and I was 35. So it was like trying to learn a whole new lifestyle. And alcohol really kind of made that process smoother and easier and a little less uncomfortable than it would have, I think, had I done it in sobriety.
Okay, thanks.
So you were saying like early drug use?
Yeah. And I use the word drugs,
Or alcohol use?
Yeah, whatever that is for you. Like what was that intersection with coming out like for you? How did the community support your decision to use?
Like I said, like my heavy drug use didn't start till I was 23. So we're talking like the early, like towards the end of the garage being open, and then the arrival of access, and then that I was forget about it. Age 23 is when my ex-boyfriend gave me my first hit of X. So I was really, really bad on X probably for about a year or two. That I just kept introducing other stuff. But for me, at the very beginning, it was fun. The first 5 years were fun, and I managed pretty good until I didn't. But yeah, like glow sticks, after hours, all that shit.
So it was part of going out was using.
Oh, for sure.
Okay. So not even alcohol, X.
Alcohol got the party started, but like that was because we knew what we were going to end up doing. Yeah.
For me, so I have two relationships with drugs and alcohol. One was when it was social and discretionary, and the second is when it was isolated and mandatory, right? And opiates and meth were in the isolated and mandatory category. Alcohol, all the party drugs, that kind of stuff was like I could take it or leave it. And that was my first introduction to the gay community. Was like I went to circuit parties. I did the socially acceptable drugs in socially acceptable ways. On the weekends, I didn't let it bleed in, didn't let it affect my career. Although I had a hard time recovering from things like ecstasy and ketamine and stuff like that because my brain chemistry is messed up. So I'm an addict, right? But early coming out, it was like I wanted to keep up with the Joneses. I wanted to drink as much as people did who'd been drinking a lot longer than I did, which meant you introduce cocaine to the mix and amphetamines and stuff like that. But when I started on the opiates around 24, 25, that's when my relationship with drugs changed because it went from being social to being something that was masking all of my fears and all of the things that I didn't know how to handle. All of my anxiety just went away. I became the perfect version of myself, or so I thought, right? And it just, and they were easy to get. This was pre-opioid crisis, right? And so, but I never talked about that stuff with my gay friends. The opiates were on the DL and the meth was on the DL until it wasn't.
Okay.
Because those weren't socially acceptable at the time in our community, like in our party community.
Sure. And for folks listening home, and I even wonder about Jen understanding, but I would like to make sure that people at home understand what we're talking about, the party culture. Like, like what does that actually mean? I think we kind of know, right? But
party culture, when we refer to it in the gay community, it's young adult to middle-aged, mostly white men who have a fair amount of disposable income, who choose to use that income traveling to coastal cities for destination parties, going to circuit parties that are done in the name of charity oftentimes, but it's anything but charitable when you get there. And that's what they do with their time and energy and money. And it's really easy to get caught up in that lifestyle when you're new to the gay community. And it's very much, in my experience, it's based on appearance, being around the right people. It's very image.
It's surface.
It's a shallow surface level. I met some great people in that culture. None of them are still in my life. But that's not to say that it chews up and spits out everybody. But for me, it was my gateway to using drugs to manage my life.
But it's sort of like working Monday through Friday and then partying on the weekends sort of thing, right? And then recovering on Monday. And right. But that's sort of how it starts. And it's like, it's manageable initially. It's a lot of fun. And then it's not.
Yep.
And it's a combination of drugs.
In that party culture, I mean, you do what you got. Mine was always a balancing act. I wanted to be in the perfect place. So if I got too high, it wasn't good. If I got too low, it was, so I just used things to balance each other out. But none of those party drugs had a hold on me. And I don't consider, I guess people consider meth a party drug. I wasn't introduced to it in the context of like social events with lots of other people, because meth makes me skittish and crazy, and that's not fun to be outside.
I would do it by myself.
Yeah, I'd rather do it by myself or with some other people in a dark room.
Do lesbians make drug use as complicated?
I don't think lesbians make anything as complicated. I mean,
Just a lot of Miller Lite, right?
there's a lot. At the end of my drinking career, it was Bud Light.
Okay.
And it was very, I mean, I was a beer, whiskey, bourbon drinker. I was never the girl that went to the bar that said, give me something fruity. I don't want it to taste like alcohol. I'm like, I need a good kick in the balls in order to make it count, in order to make it worth my while. So, I'd go to the gay bars and I got to know the bartenders because I'm very extroverted, even though I'm very anxious, I'm very extroverted. So, and I wanted the bartenders to know my name. I wanted to be that Norm at Cheers, minus the beer gut. And I said, and I'd walk in and the bartender would be like, Knob Creek? And I'm like, yes, please. Knob and Diet? Yep, you got it. And gay bars, I'm sure Anthony and Brian can both attest to, are notorious for over-serving, over-pouring. So
The gay pour.
yes, exactly. What you think is one or two shots is 3 or 4 or more, depending on the size of your glass. And next thing you know, you think, oh, I've only had 2 or 3. I should be fine. But you can barely make it to the bathroom just to pee. And you're thinking, holy cow. But then this is fun. I'm making new friends. I mean, friends. These, they were just other barflies. They weren't, like Brian said, you meet some nice people, but they're not in your life now in sobriety.
Right.
But no, I don't think it was nearly as complicated. It was just get to, as Brian mentioned, a comfort level of, appropriately altered, if you say, and then, go about your business of, I'm very social when I drink, and I will invite myself to other people's tables because I think they want to talk to me because I think I'm fantastic. And I'm like, I would go and sit at other people's tables or just walk up to them and be like, are you two a couple? You should be a couple. And I mean, nobody wants that nonsense, but that was the kind of drunk I was. I was never the mean drunk. I was never the nobody's going to take my keys. I would always give over my keys. I did drive under the influence. Fortunately, never got a DUI. But if somebody said, hey, I think you've had too much, let me drive you home. Somebody that I knew, I wouldn't hand my keys to a stranger. Although I can't figure out why, since I was doing other things that seemed
riskier.
I should have handed my keys to a stranger, but I didn't. And if a friend said, I'll drive you home, okay, we'll get my car in the morning.
Oh, go ahead.
And I was just gonna say, it's funny because it didn't seem complicated at the time. I just found people that I wanted to have sex with or I wanted to like me, and I did what they did. I just mimicked their behavior, right? Unfortunately, my brain is wired in a way that I can't just do things the way that other people do them when it comes to drugs and alcohol. And had I known then what I know now, I don't know. I probably still would have done the same thing. But I mean, it didn't seem complicated. It was just like, oh, we'll add a little bit of this and a little bit of this. And this hot guy tells me to do this. And I'm just like, I'm down. Okay, I just want to be well liked. I want attention.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, you're getting that.
I got it for all the wrong reasons eventually. Yeah.
So let's talk. Let's now switch gears. We've told the war story. So let's switch gears. What was getting into recovery like for you? Well, the statistic that I gave out earlier was a lot of us are not getting treatment or not getting care, not getting into recovery. What was that like for you? Those early days?
Frightening. I mean, I could not imagine a life without being in an elevated or altered state. It was my way. I mean, I used daily, multiple times a day for years and years and years. The thought of having to deal with life as it comes at me without any armor was terrifying. And also I was coming off of being an IV meth user, which scrambles your brain chemistry to the point that like all I could do every day was follow my treatment program and not use drugs. And it was I had to keep it that simple for a long time. But yeah, it was scary because it got to the point, like, had I not stopped, I would not be here for this interview. I'd be in jail or dead.
When I started in recovery, I was terrified. And I was so sick and so scared. I made a decision around 2:00 in the morning, because that's when we make our best decisions, as every user knows, and everybody who's been to college and stayed up and pulled all-nighters. 2 a.m. great decisions. I actually contacted Miles and said, I have a drinking problem. Can you connect me with some recovery resources? And he responded pretty quickly, and that's when I went to my first AA group. And he said, look for this person. And
I remember that.
Yeah. And he said, look for this person. I know he'll give you a hand. And I went to an LGBT group, and I was the only girl in there. And that was totally fine with me. I'm very comfortable around gay men and gay women in the gay community. So and I was, into sports and stuff. So like being around the guys wasn't ever a big deal for me. But my ego was still out of control, and so out of control. Like, I used to not date people who did not have a college education and did not have credentials after their name. And you had to have my level of education or better. And I was such a snob. And I realized that, that how minimally important that is. But I got into the rooms and I was like, I have a degree. I have multiple degrees. I'm intelligent. I'm this, I'm that. I'm better than these people. I can do better than these people. And then I realized very quickly, as people started speaking in the meeting, I don't know shit. And I'm sick and I'm scared. And I made my spouse at the time take me to my first meeting for 2 reasons. First of all, I was scared, and to let them know where I was, that I wasn't going to the bar. And I got in there and instantly felt comfortable. I was given a big book. I mean, it took me meetings are about an hour. It took me about 30 minutes to calm down. And I was given a big book. I was given a chance to comment on some readings. And at the end of the meeting, so many people came up to me, and I didn't realize that it's common to exchange phone numbers. And I was used to getting phone numbers in bars for an entirely different reason. But this was weird for me until I was told to me that this was normal, that contact is normal, that staying involved with the sobriety community is normal and is healthy and helps you stay sober and accountable. But I was absolutely terrified. And like Brian, for a while, all I could do was work and not drink. And that was it. I mean, I couldn't even go to a social engagement, to a birthday party, to dinner with a friend without thinking about, oh my gosh, am I going to drink? Am I going to be somewhere where it's going to be available? Am I going to be able to resist it?
Sure.
But I'm so glad that experience happened.
How about you, Anthony?
It was a huge blessing for me to be able to go to treatment in LA, because I feel like Columbus is relatively diverse, but I was in treatment. It was an all-male facility with Latinos, Asians, Blacks, and it was such a beautiful thing. I was in there with gangbangers, Bloods, Crips, guys that were Mexican gangs, and then also mixed in with these young, rich, suburban white kids from Bel Air and Beverly Hills. And it was truly a melting pot. And I don't know. And I remember one time I asked this white kid, I'm like, what are you doing in here? Because I was very arrogant in treatment too. Mm-hmm. I'm like, you got it made. He was like, yes, I live in a $6 million house in Bel Air, but I still ended up with a needle in my arm on Skid Row. They were like, Anthony, you have to quit judging. He said, because I have all the money in the world, private school, Jaguar, and I'm still a junkie. And the other thing about going to treatment in LA, after about 3 months, our case managers took us on little field trips. And the first trip that he took us on was the Santa Monica Pier. And we spent all day at the ocean. And I just burst into tears. And he said, the reason I brought you guys here is to show you, to Brian's point, that you can have fun in sobriety. You don't have to be loaded from sun up to sundown. Next time we went to Venice. Next time we went to Griffith Park overlooking LA. So my early days in treatment, once I got the chip off my shoulder, it was magical because LA is absolutely gorgeous. And I got exposed to, this sounds so bad to say, after I lived out there for a few years, I'm like, Columbus is pretty boring. It's just white and black people. In LA, it's Mexicans, it's Koreans. It's like truly a melting pot. So yeah, I loved it.
Nice. Good. Do you have anything more you'd like to add, Brian?
Just to say that, I'm an avid 12-step participant. Mm-hmm. I do multiple fellowships, in addition to other treatment and support groups, and I see a psychiatrist. I do all that stuff. I need as many bullets in my sobriety gun as possible. Mm-hmm. But it's amazing to me that how much addiction and alcoholism levels the playing field, and mental health levels the playing field, right? Doesn't matter where you come from, what your race is, what your religious upbringing was, is if you have this disease, you have this disease.
Right.
With that said, something that I've learned in treatment is that being able to focus on recovery is a luxury that not a lot of people, there's a lot of people that will never have that luxury, right? If you're struggling to meet your basic daily needs, if you're struggling to figure out how you're going to feed your family, how you being able to focus on your substance use issues and your mental health is something that can't be a top priority, right? So I think about some of these larger institutional systemic things sometimes now. I just have more of an appreciation for it because I go to a variety of groups and I see people from all different walks of life that are now trying to stay sober in all different walks of life, right? And for some of us, we just have had a different hand dealt to us than others. So I think that it's important that we stay connected kind of across that community and make sure that we're supporting each other.
Great.
I think in addition to what Brian said, just it really does level the playing field. And I was listening on YouTube to a speaker, an AA speaker, and it was two sponsors talking about a difficult sponsee, and the sponsee had said, I had a degree when I walked in here, and the sponsor said, well, thermometers have degrees, and you know where we put those. So I thought, you know what, that was the ego killer I needed. That's exactly what I needed. I needed to remove my head from the same place that thermometer goes, and get the chip off my shoulder, and be, an alcoholic among alcoholics.
Sure.
What's one of the barriers that I think a lot of people have to getting to sobriety to begin with is because they compare what they gave up or what they lost in their life to what other people lost, right? Like I had consequences in every aspect of my life, from legal, professional, family consequences. Every relationship was affected. Not everyone walks that path. Right. And so if you compare what you lost or what you gave up to what other people have, it's just, you got to look for the things that you have in common with people. The bottom line is that when I don't have drugs and alcohol, I think about drugs and alcohol obsessively. When I'm not thinking about them, I'm recovering from having used them. It is a constant hamster wheel of obsession over getting myself out of myself.
We are going to take a short break, and then we'll be back to finish our time together. So thank you, and we'll be right back. Alcohol, party drugs, gambling, and sex are included in most LGBTQ gatherings. It can be a lot of fun, and for some of us, it can be harmful. Whether you are looking to slow down or stop using substances altogether, find support and connection that helps you heal. Let's talk. Happy Hour, Tuesdays Without Tina, Food, Feelings, and Me, and our new space specifically for women, She, are some of the many support groups you will find at equitashealth.com. Check us out. Start healing. Welcome back to Stop Stigma, Start Healing. We are going to finish out our time together. We got a few more questions before we let our amazing panel go for the night. And the next question I have is, let's talk a little bit about the importance of now connecting with others who've had similar situations, whether it's in 12-step support groups and other community settings where as LGBTQ folks were living and living and breathing sobriety and recovery. Is that too big? I'm gonna look for you. Let's hear from you first.
So you mean, are you pretty much like referencing like sober support?
Yeah, like why is that important for you to connect with other folks in our community that are doing sober?
Because I feel like-minded people understand my experience. So someone who's not an alcoholic or addict is not going to be able to relate to the stuff I go through. That's why me surrounding myself with a lot of our mutual friends is very important, because no one else gets it. I can talk to my family. They can be a little understanding, but like-minded people can relate to my experience. To me, it's that simple.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
When I was in active addiction, alcoholism, I had relationships with people, but I was not in relation with them, right? Every relationship that I had was either mutually manipulative or it was it was toxic, codependent. Like you just like write down the list of reasons that you shouldn't be in relationships with people. And not just people I dated, friends, everybody was a mark after a certain point, right? Mm-hmm. And some of them were in on it and some of them weren't in on it. But so being sober now, I've had to learn as my disease progressed, I just used in isolation, and every relationship that I did have was sexual in nature and really depraved and not just not healthy. It was all built around serving my addiction in the most kind of aggressive way possible. So in sobriety, I've had to relearn how to be in relation with people, and it's much easier for me to be in relation with people who are in recovery because they understand what my priorities are. They understand the importance of how I structure my time, that I have to get to meetings, and that means that I have to sacrifice social time. But mostly, I've found people who understand what I've been through, what I'm going through, that are there to help me and just want me to be well for the sake of wanting me to be well, not because there's anything in it for them. And that to me was a revelation.
Not working an angle, pretty much.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would completely agree with that the relationships while you're in active addiction are incredibly dysfunctional on multiple levels, and not to say
transactional too.
Right. And not to say that we don't have dysfunctional relationships in sobriety, because we are all people and we still have our mental illnesses. We still have our personalities, and things do happen that are unpleasant. But when you're around like-minded people and people who have been through shared experiences, whether they are, like Anthony mentioned, whether it's, the kid from Skid Row or the kid from Bel Air, we all have, our brains are wired kind of in a similar way. And you can understand when somebody says, it took me 4 DUIs before I finally got it. And you're like, even though I haven't had a DUI, I get that. I get it. I understand. And I still support you. And as they say in the rooms, because when we come in, we tend to think very lowly of ourselves. The rooms say, we'll love you until you love yourself. And I needed that. I don't know, I can't speak for Brian or for Anthony, but I needed that. And I am very willing to give back that love, especially when you see somebody who's struggling, somebody who's new, maybe somebody who's just relapsed, and you say, I got you. Mm-hmm. You can call me. We can talk. We can go for coffee, and I can help you through this. I'm not a professional. I'm not a therapist, but I've been there.
Right.
And we're kind of our own little subculture, and we can get a lot done, and we can get a lot accomplished, and we can get a lot of good things done for a lot of people with a lot of like-minded people working together.
Right. I agree.
What are 3 things that we need from treatment providers? 3 things. Narrow it down. Keep it tight.
Okay. I'll start. I would like my, and as I've mentioned, I have an awesome treatment team. My therapist and my psychiatrist are incredibly intelligent, very knowledgeable people. Mm-hmm. But when I was seeking treatment, I would have liked them to have understood a little more about the LGBTQIA culture. And no, my first therapist was a lesbian, so that wasn't an issue for her. Even though she did not disclose that to me, I knew that about her from mutual friends. So that wasn't an issue. But from the medical community, it would be nice for them to understand that it kind of affects us a little bit differently. It's a different, a little different pressure, because we're already being stigmatized for our choice of partners. Now we're being stigmatized for our addictions, and to have that, maybe to remove that stigma of who we take to bed and treat us as on a level playing field with other patients, and be, I'm a 47-year-old woman with depression, anxiety, ADHD, and alcoholism, and that's what I need help with. And to have, the third thing I wish is that there were some more specialized treatment providers who advertise themselves as substance abuse counselors, that we had more of them, rather than people who practice more generally.
I was just
and
the same thing.
And who tried to kind of dabble in the substance abuse area, but really don't know the 12 steps, don't know what those things mean. When I reference a big book, I'm not talking about the Bible. I'm talking about the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. When I mention meetings, no, it is not a work meeting. It is an AA meeting. Sure. Mm-hmm. I don't go to work meetings at 7:00 on Saturday morning. Yeah.
Great.
So those would be my recommendations.
How about you, Anthony?
The main thing is, because I'm a counselor, and when I see people that work in this field that are not addicts, it makes it hard for the clients to relate to them. The clients will tell, I'm very open about my clean time, going to meetings and sponsorship. They can relate to me on that level. But when you have someone who just has like a degree and they're trying to run groups and trying to like talk to clients about sobriety and addiction, the clients just, it's a joke to them. So I feel like more people that are actually in recovery in this field, instead of just textbook smart about substance abuse.
Okay. Anything else you'd like to add to the list? We're compiling the list of what makes for a good healthcare provider.
That's the main thing.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Ryan, how about you?
I would expand upon what Anthony said a little bit with, for me, I need that peer support element, but I also need someone with clinical knowledge. Like, I have a brain disease, right? And that has affected every part of my life. I like to know how my brain chemistry works. I like to understand all of the factors that go into that. I like to understand the relationship between diet, exercise, sleep, all the lifestyle stuff, right? That affects my ability to manage stress and my triggers, and right? We're all holistic beings. And for staying sober and learning how to kind of live life with integrity again, peer support is kind of unparalleled. In terms of me being an active participant in my own treatment, I need a therapist and a psychiatrist. I need people to have an open dialogue with about the things that I'm experiencing physiologically, mentally, all of that stuff. So that's just me. I would say that cultural competency is a big deal for me, because different drugs and alcohol use affect people in effect, not it doesn't discriminate when it comes to having the disease, right? But in terms of how it affects, the trickle down effect is for people's lives, that varies quite a bit. And when it comes to treatment providers, you've got to know how to talk to people who check different boxes than you, right? And then I would also say more about meth. And because I come from a meth background, it is one of the drugs that is fundamentally, I think, misunderstood, because it doesn't affect the numbers of people that the opioid crisis affect. It doesn't affect the numbers of people that alcohol or heroin or things like that, some of those drugs that are talked about more often. There's a great misunderstanding in the clinical community about the communities that are affected by meth, the way that affects you, the fact that the treatment for it is really challenging because we don't have a harm reduction protocol the way that we do for some other drugs and alcohol. So I think that if somebody presents with meth and you're a clinical provider who doesn't know much about it, you need to have somebody in your Rolodex that you can refer them to who's really an expert in that if you want to give them a chance at success.
Very good. Well, thank you for joining us today on this episode of Happy Hour, a place where folks can join together and talk about all things sobriety and recovery. So I appreciate you, Anthony, Jen, and Brian, for coming out tonight and sharing your experience, strength, and hope with us. So thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and
It's been a
we
pleasure.
will see you on the next episode.